Sometimes you end a day and think, wow, I probably just did the dumbest thing this week. Then you open the internet, and immediately, you feel a whole lot smarter, because the internet is full of moments when people completely forget about something called common sense. In today's list, you're going to see some unbelievable situations. Someone used industrial glue as hairspray. Someone called the police because they didn't know how to drive the car that they had just stolen. And one over-the-top gender reveal was so extreme, it burned down an entire forest. After watching this, you might end up feeling a lot smarter than you did before. Story 1. Gorilla Glue Hair Disaster. A TikToker wanted something very simple for her hair to stay in place for a really long time. Not just for a few hours, but the kind of hold where even strong wind would not move a single strand. The problem was, she had run out of hairspray that day. But instead of buying more, she saw a product at home that seemed even stronger. Gorilla Glue, an industrial adhesive usually used for wood metal, and pretty much everything else except human hair. For some reason, she thought this should work. So she sprayed it on her head. For the first few minutes, everything looked pretty good. Her hair was incredibly neat. Not a single strand moved. But a few hours later, she realized there was one small problem. Her hair could no longer be washed, brushed, or moved at all. At that point, her hair was as hard as a plastic helmet. After many hopeless attempts to wash it out, she had to go to the hospital. Doctors spent hours removing the glue. The lesson here, when a product says industrial strength, it probably is not meant for hair. Story 2. YouTuber with his head inside a microwave. A YouTuber wanted to make a really viral challenge video, and somehow he came up with an idea that already sounded dangerous, put his head inside a microwave, then pour concrete around it to create a mold. His plan was pretty simple. Once the concrete dried, he would break the mold apart and have a legendary video for his channel. There was just one small detail: he did not plan for the concrete dried faster than expected. Before long, the microwave had turned into a solid block of concrete, with his head still trapped inside. He could not move. He could not pull his head out. And of course, the video was not even finished yet. In the end, his friends had to call the firefighters to rescue him. The rescue team spent quite a while breaking through the concrete. The lesson here: not every viral idea on the internet is actually a good one. Story 3. The thief who called the police to ask how to use the car. A thief had just successfully stolen a high-tech car. In his mind, he was probably thinking this was definitely his lucky day. But just a few minutes later, he discovered a pretty serious problem. He had no idea how to start the car. The control panel in front of him was filled with touchscreens, buttons, and modern electronic systems. For the actual owner, everything was convenient. For him, it looked like the cockpit of a spaceship. He tried pressing almost every button in the car. Nothing happened. The car stayed right where it was. After a few minutes of struggling, he made a decision that probably made sense even to himself. He called the police to ask how to operate the car. There was just one small detail: the police are pretty good at tracing phone calls. Not long after that, they found the car, along with the man sitting inside, still confused by the dashboard. Story 4. The bank robbery. Committed with a cucumber. A bank robber was planning his big heist. By normal logic, you would need a gun to threaten the employees. The problem was, he did not have a gun, but he did have something else: a cucumber. And in his mind, a genius idea appeared. He took a marker, colored the cucumber black, hid it inside his jacket, and walked into the bank looking very serious. When he got to the counter, he placed his weapon on the desk and acted threatening as if it were a real gun. For a few short minutes, the plan actually seemed to work. The bank employees were pretty frightened, but the problem with a cucumber gun is that it does not really look like a gun when you look closely. After reviewing the security footage, the police quickly identified the suspect. As it turns out, in the history of crime, this may have been one of the healthiest weapons ever used. Story 5. The flamethrower spider disaster. A man was at home when he noticed an uninvited guest, a spider, in the laundry room. Now, normally you might solve this problem with a shoe, a paper towel, or simply leave it alone. But this man chose a more aggressive approach. He decided to eliminate the spider with a homemade flamethrower. The plan sounded very effective. Fire solves everything, right? There was just one small detail he didn't think about. Laundry rooms contain quite a lot of flammable things. Within minutes, the spider was still somewhere in the room while the fire had already spread through the area. In the end, the fire department had to show up to put out the flames in the entire apartment. The damage ended up costing tens of thousands of dollars. And the spider? No one knows for sure, but there's a good chance it walked away with a pretty incredible story to tell its friends. Story 6. The selfie dance in front of a leopard enclosure. A tourist went to the zoo with a very modern goal to film a unique video for social media. She stood in front of a leopard enclosure, turned on the camera, and started dancing. In her mind, this was probably a brilliant idea. A fun little dance with one of the most dangerous predatory cats on the planet right behind her. Surely that would go viral. The problem was, the leopard did not seem to appreciate the performance. While she was dancing and smiling at the camera, the animal moved closer to the fence, looking very focused. In a split second, it reached its paw through a gap in the barrier and attacked. The video ended instantly in chaos as people nearby started screaming. She was lucky to survive. But that zoo visit came with a very clear lesson. Sometimes your audience does not enjoy the content you are creating. Story 7. The bear and the car door. A driver was passing through a forest when he saw a rare sight, a very large bear standing near the road. Instead of just driving away like most people would, he thought, "This is definitely great video content." He stopped the car, pulled out his phone to record, and decided to make the video even more interesting. He opened the car door and started talking to the bear like he was trying to make friends with a giant pet. For the first few seconds, the bear just stood there watching. Maybe it was also confused about why a human was talking to it. Then it moved toward the car, and with one strong pull, the bear ripped off the car door as if it were just a piece of cardboard. The video ended very quickly after that. The car was badly damaged, and the man filming it learned one simple lesson. Wild animals do not care about viral content. Story 8. The ATM explosion that went a bit too far. A thief decided to carry out a plan that sounded very cinematic: open an ATM using explosives. In his head, the script was simple. A small explosion, the machine pops open, and money flies out like in an action movie. There was just one problem. He had no idea how much explosive was actually needed. Instead of researching it, he chose a solution that felt safer in his mind. Use a little more. When the explosion happened, it was definitely impressive. A huge blast dust and smoke everywhere, and the ATM was completely destroyed. The problem was, the ATM was not the only thing that got destroyed. The money inside suffered the same fate. Instead of neat stacks of cash, the scene was filled with burnt scraps and shredded pieces of paper. After all the effort and the dramatic explosion, the thief ended up with a very expensive pile of confetti. Story 9. The gender reveal that started a wildfire. A man wanted to organize a very dramatic gender reveal to announce the gender of his soon-to-be-born baby. Blue or pink balloons or a colored cake felt a little too ordinary. So he decided to do something bigger. A homemade device that would shoot colored smoke into the air. The idea sounded simple. Press a button. Blue or pink smoke appears. Everyone claps. The video goes online. And boom. Instant viral moment. There was just one small detail he did not expect. The device exploded, and the area around them was full of dry grass and bushes. The flames spread quickly into a massive wildfire. Firefighters spent several days trying to control it. The final result, more than 47,000 acres were burned. The gender reveal was definitely memorable. It just also became one of the most expensive baby announcements in history. Story 10. Driving straight into wet concrete. A woman was driving when she came across a construction site right on the road. In front of her was an area freshly poured with wet concrete along with several warning signs. The signs were very clear: do not enter. There were barriers, there was caution tape. Basically every signal was trying to say, please take another route. But in her mind, a very confident thought appeared. Maybe she could drive across it before the concrete hardened. So she pressed the gas and drove into the wet concrete. For the first few seconds, the car was still moving. Then the wheels started sinking. Then deeper and deeper. Within moments, the car was stuck in the hardening concrete like a very expensive modern sculpture. Workers had to call a tow truck to rescue it, and the road had to be poured all over again. Story 11. Testing a helmet with a shovel. A man wanted to prove that his new helmet was incredibly durable. Instead of reading the technical specs or watching test videos, he decided to run a real-life experiment. The plan was simple: put the helmet on his head, and ask his friend to hit him with a shovel. According to his logic, if the helmet could survive the hit, then it was clearly an amazing product. At first his friend looked a little hesitant, but eventually he agreed to help. The swing happened. The good news, the helmet worked perfectly. It did not crack, it did not break, it even looked pretty normal afterward. The bad news was that his neck did not handle it quite as well. The force from the shovel went straight through, and he nearly collapsed on the spot. Turns out the helmet can protect your head very well, but nobody said anything about the neck underneath it. Story 12. Stuck inside a chimney. A man decided to do something most people already know is a bad idea: break into his ex-girlfriend's house. Instead of knocking like a normal person, he chose a plan that sounded more cinematic. He climbed onto the roof and tried to slide down through the chimney like Santa Claus, but with a much less romantic mission. The problem is, chimneys in movies look nice and spacious. Chimneys in real life are not like that at all. After just a few minutes, he realized he was completely stuck inside the chimney, unable to go up or down. This situation might have lasted a very long time if the homeowners had not decided to do something very normal. They lit a fire in the fireplace. Not long after, they started hearing panicked screaming coming from inside the chimney. And that was the moment everyone realized there was a very strange guest in the house. Story 13. The rumor about charging an iPhone in the microwave. One day, the internet started spreading a tech tip that sounded incredibly convenient. You could charge your iPhone using a microwave. The idea sounded amazing. No charging cable, no power outlet, just put the phone in the microwave for a few seconds, and the battery would be full. It sounded like science fiction. But on the internet, when enough people say the same thing, it starts to look more believable than it should. So some people decided to try it. They placed their iPhones into the microwave, closed the door, and pressed the button. For the first few seconds, everything seemed normal. Then came spark smoke and the smell of something burning. Instead of a full battery, the phone now looked like a melted piece of scorched plastic. Turns out microwaves are very good at heating food. But when used to charge a phone, the result is usually a perfectly well-cooked iPhone that will never turn on again. Story 14. The crossbow in the pants. A thief decided to steal something a little unusual from a store: a crossbow. The problem was, a crossbow is not exactly easy to hide in a jacket pocket or a backpack. So he came up with a solution that seemed very clever in his own mind: hide it in his pants. After stuffing the crossbow down his pants, he tried to walk out of the store like everything was completely normal. There was just one small problem. Walking around with a long crossbow hidden in your pants makes your walk look very unusual. Security cameras captured him moving stiffly and slowly, like someone trying to balance a very large object. The footage quickly caught the attention of store employees. The police were called not long after, and with a walk that distinctive, identifying the suspect was not difficult at all. Story 15. The thief and the lasagna. A thief broke into a house with a very simple plan: get in quickly, grab a few valuables, and leave before anyone noticed. While searching around the kitchen, he opened the freezer and found something pretty tempting: a box of frozen lasagna. For someone who was hungry, this was basically treasure. Instead of continuing to look for things to steal, he decided to do something very unusual for a burglary. He turned on the oven, cooked the lasagna, and sat down to eat like this was his own kitchen. The meal seemed very good, maybe a little too good. After finishing it, he felt full and extremely sleepy. So he lay down on the couch in the living room just to rest for a moment. The problem was, he fell asleep completely. When the homeowners returned, they did not just see signs of a break-in. They also found the thief sleeping peacefully on the couch. Story 16. Walking straight into a canal. A woman was walking down the street while doing something many modern people do every day: staring at her phone. Maybe she was texting, maybe watching a video, or maybe reading a very important internet argument. Meanwhile, her feet kept moving forward very confidently. There was just one small problem. She was not looking at the road at all. Right in front of her was a canal running along the street with a very low edge. People nearby started to realize what was about to happen. But before anyone could say anything, she walked straight into the canal. Her phone, her bag, and all that earlier confidence disappeared in one very wet fall. Fortunately, she was not seriously injured. But the footage from a nearby camera quickly spread across the internet as a very clear lesson about walking while using your phone. Story 17. Trying to push the Leaning Tower of Pisa. A tourist visited Italy for the first time and stood in front of one of the most famous buildings in the world, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Looking at the tower, he had a very simple thought. If it's leaning, why not just push it back straight? In his mind, this sounded perfectly logical, so he walked closer, placed both hands on the tower, and started pushing with all his strength. Of course, the tourists around him assumed he was just taking one of those classic photos where people pretend to hold the tower up. Almost everyone does that here, but he was actually trying to push it. He leaned forward, tensed his muscles, and tried to generate as much force as possible. There was just one small detail he had not considered. The Leaning Tower of Pisa weighs more than 14,000 tons. After a few seconds of determined effort, the tower remained exactly where it was, and he looked like someone who had just tried to arm wrestle a mountain. Story 18. Shining a laser at the wrong helicopter. A man had just bought a very powerful laser pointer online. According to the advertisement, this laser could shine for miles. Naturally, when you get a new gadget like that, you want to test how strong it really is. So one evening, he went outside and started pointing the laser into the sky. He tried aiming it at the clouds, at the stars, and then he saw something flying by. So he pointed the laser straight at it. In his mind, it was just a helicopter passing overhead. There was just one small detail. It was a police helicopter, and pilots usually do not enjoy having lasers pointed at their cockpit. The helicopter immediately turned around, lowered its altitude, and landed not far from where he was standing. A few minutes later, he was no longer testing his laser. He was explaining his scientific experiment to the police. Story 19. Draining a reservoir to find a phone. A local official was standing near a large reservoir when a very modern accident happened. He dropped his phone into the water. For most people, this would be the moment to sigh, accept fate, and buy a new phone. But he had one special advantage. He had the authority to give orders. So instead of saying goodbye to the phone, he decided to do something most people could never do. Order the reservoir to be drained. Millions of liters of water began flowing out so they could search for the tiny phone somewhere at the bottom. After a lot of effort, they finally found it. The good news, the phone was still there. The bad news, after sitting underwater for so long, it no longer worked at all. In other words, after all that effort, the final result was exactly the same as if nothing had been done. Story 20. Accidentally siphoning a sewage tank. A man decided to do something you often see in movies, siphon gasoline from another vehicle using a hose. This time his target was an RV, a large travel vehicle that usually has a pretty big gas tank. His plan was very simple. Put the hose into the gas tank, suck a little to start the flow, and collect the reward. There was just one small detail. RVs have several different types of tanks. Besides the gas tank, there is also something called a sewage tank. In the dark, he picked the wrong one. He placed the hose into the tank, started sucking, and waited for gasoline to come out. Instead, the first thing he received was a liquid that was definitely not gasoline. The taste and smell probably made him realize the mistake immediately. Some lessons in life cost money. This lesson was probably remembered through a very unforgettable experience. Story 21. The Dynamite Candle. A man was cleaning his storage shed when he found something that looked pretty familiar, a long stick that resembled a candle. For many people, when you see a candle, the natural reaction is simple: light it. And that is exactly what he did. He placed it on the table, took out a lighter, and lit the tip of the candle, looking quite satisfied, probably expecting a warm little flame. There was just one small detail he did not know. It was not a candle. It was dynamite. The moment the flame touched it, the situation went from pretty relaxing to extremely dangerous in just a few seconds. The explosion shook the entire area. The surprising part was that he actually survived. After that day, he probably learned a very simple rule before lighting something: make sure it is not explosives. Story 22. Paying a fine with homemade money. A man had a rather unusual belief that the law did not really apply to him. So when he received a fine, he decided to solve the problem in a very creative way. He printed his own money. Not counterfeit money in some sophisticated way, just pieces of paper with numbers and pictures printed on them that looked kind of like real money, if you glanced at them very quickly and not too carefully. Then he brought this money to the courthouse to pay his fine. In his mind, the plan was perfect. He gives the money, they accept it, and the problem is solved. There was just one small issue. Court employees tend to look at money very carefully. Within seconds, they realized this was not real currency, and the court was not impressed by his homemade monetary system. The result was that he did not only still have his fine, he also gained a brand new legal problem. Story 23. The Wasabi Spoon of Destiny. A tourist walked into a sushi restaurant for the first time, excited to explore Japanese cuisine. While waiting for the main dish, she noticed a small green bowl sitting next to the sushi plate. For many people, green dip in a small bowl usually means guacamole, a mashed avocado dip that is very common and usually very delicious. So in her mind, a very natural thought appeared. Oh, this must be free dipping sauce. Without thinking much, she picked up a spoon and scooped a very generous amount, then put it straight into her mouth. For the first few seconds, she looked fairly calm. Then everything changed very quickly. Her eyes opened wide, her nose suddenly burned. Tears almost appeared instantly, because the bowl did not contain guacamole. It was wasabi, a condiment famous for its ability to attack your entire sinus system within seconds. Everyone at the table nearby immediately realized she had just eaten a full spoon of pure wasabi. Story 24. The Exploding Potato. A man wanted to cook a potato quickly for dinner. The obvious solution in a modern kitchen is the microwave. Just a few minutes and you're done, right? But this man thought that if a few minutes was good, then more minutes must be even better. So he placed the potato in the microwave and let it run for a very long time. Meanwhile, inside the potato, steam began to build up. Pressure kept increasing, like a balloon being pumped full of air. The only problem was that he had no idea this was happening, until, boom, the potato exploded inside the microwave. The blast was strong enough to break the microwave door, and the inside looked like a full-scale potato disaster. After a few seconds of silence, one thing became very clear. Potatoes can cook fast, but they should not be turned into explosive devices. Story 25. The Phone in the Oven. A man accidentally dropped his phone into water. The screen was still on, but inside it was clearly wet. For most people, the usual solution would be to let the phone air dry or maybe put it in rice. But this man had an idea that sounded very logical in his mind. He thought heat dries things, so he decided to place the phone inside the kitchen oven. Just a few minutes, he thought, and the phone would be dry again. He put the phone into the oven, turned on the heat, and waited for the result. For the first few minutes, everything was quiet. Then a smell of hot plastic started to appear. When he opened the oven, the phone no longer looked like a phone. The outer case was warped. The screen had bent and the inside was almost melted. The water may have evaporated, but the phone was no longer working. Story 26. The Convertible in the Car Wash. A man had just bought a brand new convertible car. To him, it was the dream car, beautiful, sporty, and perfect for driving on sunny days. One day, he decided to take it for a wash. Instead of washing it by hand, he drove straight into an automatic car wash, the kind with giant spinning brushes and high-pressure water jets. He stopped the car in the right spot and waited for the system to start. There was just one small detail he forgot. The roof of the car was not metal. It was soft fabric. When the massive spinning brushes started rotating and sweeping over the top of the car, everything happened very quickly. Within seconds, the fabric roof was stretched, twisted, and then ripped apart. When the car wash finished its cycle, the car looked very clean. The only problem was, the roof was no longer there. Story 27. The Frozen Turkey and the Oil Explosion. A man decided to deep fry a whole turkey for a family dinner. He prepared everything like a professional. A giant pot of oil in the backyard, a large gas burner underneath, and the oil heated to the perfect temperature. Everything seemed ready for a spectacular meal. There was just one small detail he did not notice. The turkey was still frozen. Inside, it was still packed with ice. When he lowered the turkey into the pot of boiling oil, what happened next looked almost like a dangerous physics experiment. The ice inside the meat instantly turned into steam when it hit the hot oil. Pressure built up in a split second, and then, boom! Hot oil shot into the air and caught fire. Within seconds, flames spread across the backyard. Firefighters had to arrive to put out the blaze, and that night's dinner ended up with a completely different menu. Story 28. Skateboarding down the legendary hill. A teenager decided to try something thrilling, skateboarding down a famous hill in the city. Standing at the top, everything looked simple. The road was long, straight, and looked perfect for an action video. He placed the board on the ground, pushed once, and started rolling downhill. For the first few seconds, everything felt great. The wind rushed past his ears, his speed kept increasing, and he almost felt like the star of an extreme sports movie. There was just one small detail he had not thought about. He did not know how to stop. The farther he went down the hill, the faster he moved. Very quickly, he realized he had lost all control. He tried to balance, tried to slow down, but the hill kept pulling him faster and faster. The ride ended with a rather dramatic crash at the bottom of the road. The video was definitely exciting, just not the ending he had imagined. Story 29. Mailing a stamp on a brick. A man wanted to send a stamp to his friend. For most people, the process is simple. Put the stamp in an envelope, seal it, and drop it into the mailbox. But this man came up with a much more creative approach. He stuck the stamp directly onto a brick. Then with complete confidence, he carried the brick to a public mailbox and dropped it in as if it were a perfectly normal letter. According to his logic, if it had a stamp on it, the postal service would deliver it. The interesting part is that the postal service actually did. They just added one extra step. They charged shipping based on the weight of the package, and that brick weighed about 5 pounds. So instead of a cheap letter, the gift ended up becoming a very heavy package, with a surprisingly expensive delivery fee. Story 30. The free car wash in the rain. One day a man looked out the window and saw a huge rainstorm pouring down. Immediately an idea popped into his head. If it's raining this hard, why not use it for a free car wash? So he drove his car out into the rain. To make the plan more professional, he even brought a bottle of car soap. While slowly driving through the rain, he rolled the window down and tried to squeeze the soap outside, hoping the rainwater would wash away the dirt like a natural car wash. In theory, the plan sounded pretty smart. In reality, the wind blew the soap everywhere. The rain did not rinse evenly, and most of the foam flew straight back into the car. After a few minutes of struggling in the rain, he finally pulled over. Looking at the result, the car was still almost as dirty as before, and the inside of the car now had a lot more foam than expected. Story 31. The final genius idea. The internet has a very special feature. It is a place where millions of people wake up every day convinced they just invented a brilliant life hack. The idea usually starts very simple. Someone looks at a small problem in life and thinks people have been doing it this way for years. But I have a smarter way. And that's when the experiment begins. Someone uses industrial glue instead of hairspray. Someone tries to charge a phone in a microwave. Someone decides to deep fry a frozen turkey in boiling oil. In their heads, everything sounds reasonable. But reality usually follows a very different script. Instead of becoming an internet genius, they become another story on the list of the worst ideas ever attempted. And the special thing about the internet is that once that moment gets recorded, it never disappears. Sometimes people do things so baffling, even science has to take a deep breath. But honestly, those ridiculous moments are exactly what make the internet so entertaining. We laugh, we shake our heads, and sometimes we even learn a small lesson. Common sense is not always as common as the name suggests. So out of today's list, which story shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you've ever seen a genius idea end in disaster, go ahead and share that too. If this video made you laugh, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more strange stories just like this.